Hey folks, how's it going? How's it going? Welcome to our weekly live interview coaching with Day One Careers. My name is Evgeny. You guys will know who I am. Gigi and I run this channel, and this is our weekly show where we answer any and all of your questions about behavioral interviews with Amazon. And here's Gigi. How's it going?
Hey, sorry I'm late.
That is all good. I was just explaining folks where they are in case they think they're lost.
Fair enough. Is
You look
anyone
like you
lost?
got a suntan. Have you been out gardening or something?
Yeah, a bit. So I went to the zoo on
Yes, you did.
Friday and I've done gardening and car washing over the weekend. So yeah, I might have picked up a little bit of colour.
Awesome. All right. Shall I just continue with
Yep, you do that. I
this?
just need to open another page so I know where everything is on YouTube. So keep going and then I'll catch up.
Cool. All right. So anyway, folks. So the way that this show works is you ask us any questions that you have about behavioral interviews at Amazon. We answer them. We hope to do a good job doing that because both Gigi and I, we used to be senior Amazonians. We used to be hiring managers, interviewers, and Gigi was also a bar raiser, as you know. So you are in really good hands. And we've been running this business together since February 2022. Before that, Gigi and I had our separate businesses. She had the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy. I had this Day One Careers, but it was a much smaller business. And both Gigi and I both had a very interesting journey to kind of running an Amazon interview coaching business. So mine was essentially at the end of my tenure with Amazon, when I was about to move to Apple, I started running little experiments with phone screens where if I saw that I had a qualified candidate who just wasn't interviewing well, rather than rejecting them, I would spend the last 15 minutes of the phone screen to give them some coaching, and then I would pass them to the second phone screen, and the candidates usually did better with some coaching. But Gigi's journey was a bit different. What was your journey into this whole coaching thing?
Yeah, so I was a bar raiser, as we all know. So I spent a lot of time interviewing. I probably did about 3 interviews a week. And I started to notice when I scaled to that much volume of interviewing, because it's you get less interviews obviously when you're not a bar raiser. I started to notice patterns of people doing some peculiar things, but common peculiar things, which in itself is quite peculiar. So I started to ask the people I was interviewing why they chose that strategy, where they got their insight from, and they all started to point me to YouTube. So I had a dig into YouTube and discovered a couple of channels that were focused on Amazon interview preparation. There were no way near as many then as there are now, because obviously everyone's seen how fabulous we are and tried to copy us. But those channels, I think one of them had never been an Amazonian before, and they must be getting their information secondhand. And they were obviously getting things confused or lost in translation and sharing things that were just fundamentally incorrect, which blew my mind and made me furious. The other channels were done by people who had previously been Amazonians, but had been in very specific parts of Amazon. So the advice they were giving was not necessarily incorrect for their parts of Amazon, but they weren't generically applicable, which made me concerned that people would be picking up tips from them, thinking they could apply them regardless of what role they're interviewing for, and again end up in a little bit of a sticky situation. So I just set up my own YouTube channel. I was still at Amazon at the time, got great support from the Amazon recruiting teams. They were promoting my channel in their channels and also internally. When I left Amazon, I just thought I would continue on this journey and see if I could make a few pennies to bridge some gap in my husband and my earnings and outgoings. And that's kind of how I came to this. And then we had a shared candidate who thought we were both great and introduced us to each other. And the rest is history, as they say.
Indeed. So, guys, you're in great hands. That's basically the whole point of this, all of our intros. I see that some of you already started using the to post your questions. So, folks, that's exactly how this works. You add your questions into the chat box. Make sure the questions are not about anything functional, because Amazon has what was our last estimate? 10,000 job
Yeah, I think
families,
it's
something
over
ridiculous.
10,000 different job families. Yeah.
Exactly. And as much as we would want to, but Gigi and I just physically could not be experts in every single functional area. But all of your, whatever your functional profile and job family, they will have behavioral interviews, and those tend to be more uniform across Amazon. And so this is where we can really help you. So make sure your questions are about behavioral interviews. Then also make sure that your questions aren't just very generic, like I have an interview with Amazon next week. Do you have any tips? Because yes, we do have tips, but they're all in our YouTube channel. Just go and get all of those general foundational tips. But if you have something specific about your situation, then post a question into the chat box, and we'll bring it up here on your screens, and we're gonna do our best answering your question. Um, just be mindful of the fact that the chat box will limit the number of characters that you can put in there. So if you have a long question, that's absolutely fine. Just break it into parts and just post these parts separately and label each part like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that we can locate your parts if they are in different places of the chat. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Have I missed anything?
Nope, you've got everything. So let's get going. Just to say, folks, we do have an hour. So as long as you keep asking questions, we'll keep answering them.
Cool.
Shall I
All
pick the
right.
first one?
Yeah, please.
Seeing as you've done all of that. So let me just pick this one. Can you help with marketing interview? Yes, we can. I guess we can help in multiple ways. We have a, oh, my ear thing's going to fall out. Hang on a second. Oh, I'm always losing it. Yes. So we have a digital course that we created, which basically prepares everyone and anyone for the behavioral part of the interview. So it's completely agnostic of, do you like that word? I like that word, agnostic.
Agnostic. Yeah.
It's completely agnostic. It doesn't matter what role, specific job family you're going for. Our course will hold you hand by hand. Is that right? Hand in hand. Anyway, from the very beginning of having nothing written down all the way through to having really well refined stories that you can be confident answer the leadership principle questions. So we can help you in that respect. In the other respect, we can help you with one-to-one coaching. So we can help anyone with one-to-one coaching because, as I said, our expertise is in behavioral interviews, which are agnostic of your job family. However, Yevgeny and I are actually ex-marketers. I suppose we're still current marketers as well because we have to current market our current business. So we are marketers. So if there was one job family where somebody wanted specific functional answers, that's the job family we can support with. None of the others, but specifically on marketing, we've obviously got a whole bunch of experience between ourselves for marketing. So yes, we can do that. And then Viral, I can see later you're saying it's the senior marketing manager position. Yeah. I mean, we were both L8s. Oh, sorry, L7s. Why did I say L8? We're both L7s. So yeah, no problem.
I was an L6.
Oh, were you? How did I not
not.
know that? Oh, great. I can boss you about.
Yes, you can. You can try.
I could try. Right, that's it. Yeah. So do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yes. So here's the next one. Hi, Gigi. I had a loop prep call, and there will be 5 interviews. 20% technical, 80% LP. I thought the loop is strictly based on Amazon LPs, and it's more structured compared to the phone screen. And so, yes, it is more structured, but no, it doesn't have to be purely behavioral. It could be a mix of behavioral and technical slash functional. It's just, it depends. So, for example, if your role has a technical component to it, then unless you are writing code, then the team that interviews you can pick how they assess your functional or technical competency. They can also, some teams can choose not to do that at all. But what they've done here is they've advised you specifically that there will be a technical component, so you can prepare. My advice would be to actually just ask them how they're going to evaluate your technical skills, what sort of assessments will they be using, and then prepare for those. But it's absolutely normal for roles with a strong functional component that the team doesn't believe will fully shine through in your behavioral interviews to include some sort of specific functional assessment there. Anything you'd add, Gigi?
Nope, nothing to add. Well, I picked the second question.
Yeah,
Here's
why
two of
not?
two. So let me do that one. Okay. So, who decides if the loop contains 4, 5, or 6 interviews? Okay, so I'll do that one first. So, a lot of that is defined by the actual level of the role. So, if you are applying for an L5 role, usually you would get 5 interviews. If you're applying for an L6 role, usually you would get 5 interviews. If you're applying for an L4 role, usually you would get 4 interviews. If you're applying for an L7 role, you are more likely to get 6 interviews. So it's very much dependent on seniority. There is a level of wiggle room in there. So some L4s get 5 interviews instead of 4 interviews. Some L5s get 5 interviews get 4 interviews instead of 5. Who's going to decide that in terms of the wiggle room? That will be the hiring manager. They will make a decision as to how many LPs essentially they really need to get through, and therefore how many subsequent interviews they need to have at loop. Second one, how do you foresee this 20% technical being assessed as part of the loop based on your experience woven into LP questions? Very unlikely to be woven into LP questions. And I think Yevgeny touched on this a minute ago when he was answering your question. If the strategy is to kind of gain your functional data through LP questions, then you would have been told it was 100% LP. So the fact that they've told you it's clearly divided between 80% LP and 20% functional, there will be specific functional questions. Exactly what structure that will take is actually a little uncertain because that's not particularly well codified in the Amazon interview process. So what you might get is hypothetical questions, i.e. what would you do if? You might also get kind of what you would imagine to be kind of behavioral questions, but they're not behavioral questions. They're tell me about a time when, well, I suppose they are in a way, but they're functional behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when you dealt with this type of technology or this type of problem. Or it could be something like, tell me about what you know about this particular functional thing. So it could fall into any of those 3 models. So you're going to have to be prepared for those 3 models. What we would usually say to people is, if you are asked about a hypothetical question, i.e., what would you do if? The ideal scenario is to be able to identify a time where you did actually do that in your career history. And rather than talking about it hypothetically, you talk about it in real terms, in terms of reflecting on the actual experience that you had at the time. That can usually lead to a much tighter answer to the question. When you're talking about hypotheticals, you can sometimes kind of fall over the hypotheticals of the hypotheticals with the assumptions of the hypotheticals, etc., and your story can get a little bit muddy. So if you can, try and take it back to an actual experience that you have, and generally those stories come across a little bit more cleanly. Okay, do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
I will. Yeah. So the next one, I think, is just a quick one here. So can you help with the first recruiter round, and then for the loop? Yes. So we can help throughout the process. I have nothing to add on top of what Gigi already explained about our offerings. But in terms of how long should your answers be, 2 to 3 minutes long. So the official Amazon guidance is that your answers need to be 4 minutes or quicker or less. Our guidance is that the higher the level of the role that you're interviewing for, and the more senior the title, the longer your answer can and probably should be. So roughly speaking, for the number of minutes that your answer needs to run for is roughly what the level of the role is. I mean, for level 4, it's 4 minutes. You could make it 4 to 5 minutes, so include a 1-minute tolerance. But for, let's say, for all the way up to L7, I'd say it's about 7 minutes. The reason why we're saying this is because as the level of the role that you're interviewing for increases, so are the expectations in terms of the seniority that you bring to the table. And one of the very potent ways to signal that you've got what it takes to operate at that level is to demonstrate that you previously solved problems that were of the same or similar complexity to what Amazon will be asking you to do in a more senior role. And the only way to do this is to spend more time explaining what those problems were and talking about how you did that. So, so that's it. I said it would be a short answer, but it wasn't a short answer. I managed to make it long for some reason.
Yeah, they never are really. You always think things are going well. It's true of everything in life, really. You think everything's going to take a lot less time than it actually ends up taking, as my experience of life, anyway. All right, so let's pick the next one. So, Clear, nice name. I've developed over 20 star stories aligned to different functional skills. Okay, for the phone screen. What is the best mix to prioritize objection? Right. Okay. So, Clea, you're asking, this is clearly a specific functional question you're asking me because you're talking about objection handling, strategic deal structure, or pipeline development. So, this is obviously some kind of sales role. So, I cannot and will not give you any advice as regards this question because I am not an expert in sales. What I will say is you've told me that you've developed 20 star stories aligned to different functional skills, but you've made no mention of the leadership principles. So be wary because you're very likely to be asked questions about leadership principles in your phone screen in as much as you're likely to be asked functional skills in your phone screen. So do make sure that you take those 20 star stories aligned to different functional skills and you identify what main leadership principle you're demonstrating in each of those 20 star stories, or you're going to find yourself very unstuck when someone asks you a question that actually isn't a question structured around functional skills. Okay. Cool. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yeah. Oh, Pixie. I remember Pixie.
Pixie's back. Hey.
Hope you two are well. I'm about to schedule my loop. Okay, so there's 5 interviews. Options are all in one day, 2 consecutive days, or no preference. Any recommendations? Not really. It's up to you. It has no bearing, no difference to how your responses are evaluated. Just consider what would you like to do one day and that's it. You put it all behind you and you can relax and do what you want. Or maybe you want to split it into two days, have your first round of interviews. Then if you, for example, are coming in with a story bank with all the stories nicely arranged, for example, if you're one of the amazing people who have our Amazon interview success system where we do give you that database, and so then you can tick them off as in you've used them in an interview, so you don't you don't use them again. It's really up to you, but to Amazon it makes no difference whatsoever. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yeah, sure. I'd seen the next one. I was trying to find a document, but never mind. Okay, so it's Pixie again. Pixie again. Hello. There we go. So Pixie has mapped their stories carefully to the leadership principles. Good start. But I now have quite a few of them. Okay. Which makes it hard to recall the right one quickly when practicing random questions. Okay. So I guess your next question is, there you go, it is. Do you have any tips on how to structure internalized story recall for the actual loop? Okay, so there are a few different methods you can try. So for our clients who use our Amazon interview success system, I always have to spend a second thinking about what those 4 letters mean.
I think you're on mute.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Our AI story bank basically allows you to store your stories on our server, and it has basically a search capability. So it allows you to search for a story based on either, I think, the story title or the leadership principle or some tags that we've got on there. So that's one method you can use, literally putting it into some kind of a bank, which you can then pick the variables from to allow it to surface. The other things that you can do are a little bit lower tech. So you can build a spreadsheet with the titles of your stories on them and tag them with the leadership principles you think they lean most into. And you can use those spreadsheets and filters and things like that on spreadsheets to try and help you find the right story, or at least narrow down to a selection of stories that might make sense for the particular question you're being asked. The other thing you can do, and it's a bit old-fashioned, so I'm just going to show you all. Hang on a second, because I'm an old-fashioned Gen X girl. Hang on a sec.
This is going to be interesting.
There we go. So this is what I do because I'm not great at reading off screens. So I have built this little notepad tool here, basically, which I have written my key points of my story in. Let's say here, you might see it's got situation, task, action, result in it. And I then put a little paper tag on the top of it. So when I realize I want to tell a particular story, I would literally just look down, touch the tab, flip it over, read the key bullet points that I've got written down, and then head back up and talk to the interviewer. So you can be as old-fashioned. I mean, it's not written on a wax tablet, which my kids would assume that I would be doing when I was at school, but the kind of old-fashioned, or you can use a spreadsheet or a tool like we've built in terms of AI. It's actually completely dependent on your preference. I think the one thing that I would say, and I know Yevgeny would agree with me on this one, is however you've got it documented, make sure you answer the question. Please, please, please don't listen to the question and try and guess the leadership principle and then just tell the interviewer the leadership principle story that you had already created, because the risk is that you might not actually be answering the question. And that is the biggest reason why, or the biggest complaint, I should say, that we ever got from interviewers as bar raisers, that the candidate wasn't answering the question. And the main reason is they've gone through this process of trying to guess what the leadership principle is, and then just telling that leadership principle story. And hey ho, it didn't answer the question. So you really have to make sure that you answer the question, and you need to use your pre-prepared question bank to help you answer the question. What you don't want to do is use your pre-prepared question bank to help you answer the leadership principle, because quite often that is a road to disaster. Do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yes. Okay. What is the best way to defer a question without hurting your chances? Say, I may have an answer for it, but I don't feel it is particularly strong. Okay, so it really depends what you mean by defer, and it depends on what you defer it to and what happens after that. There is a scenario where you don't hurt your chances, and then there's a scenario where you do, and that's just the reality of it. So, if, for example, someone asks you a question and you don't believe that you have a strong answer, but maybe you then think you have maybe something similar, maybe that's something that you don't believe answers the question specifically, but it might be a strong story. You can always volunteer a skeleton. Just say something like, well, it doesn't look like I've got something that has this specific context, but I have something else, which I think might work. Can I just run a skeleton or a quick summary of the story by you, and you tell me if that's if that's all right. If you don't think that you have anything at all and you don't feel like sharing your particular story, you can say, unfortunately, it doesn't look like I have a response to this particular question, but is there any other question that you can ask me? In which case, the interviewer will most likely ask you a different question. Now, we just need to hope that you've got a story that answers to that question, because if you don't, then this is when it would be difficult for an interviewer to grade your response as anything kind of that counts towards a positive hiring decision, if that makes sense. So there is no perfect silver bullet for the situation where you've got nothing to say. There are some there is a way to kind of mitigate the the risk of negative outcomes, but if you completely have got nothing, then unfortunately it's not going to work. Anything you would add, G?
So I just build on what you said there in terms of Yevgeny gave the advice that you can offer the interviewer a summary of the story that you think isn't quite right, but is almost there. And then they can tell you yes or no in terms of using it. The reason why we recommend that is essentially, if they tell you to go ahead and you tell your story and it turns out that actually that story doesn't address what they were hoping it would address, the responsibility for that failure to answer the question, and I take you back to my point earlier about that being the biggest complaint of interviewers when you get to debrief, the responsibility for the failure to answer the question is not on you, because that interviewer gave you the go ahead to use that story. So it's just a little bit of an insurance policy. So if you weren't convinced in terms of doing that process that Yevgeny had described to you, hopefully what I've just told you will convince you, because the last thing you want is people complaining about you that you didn't answer the question. Okay, shall I pick the next one?
Please.
There's a disgusting fly flying around my office. I hate flies. Ugh. Anyway, okay, clear again. Should I prepare to answer functional questions for the phone screen? Okay, so our advice would be clear. Ask your recruiter. They're about the only one that's going to know exactly how your phone screen is going to be structured, other than the person who's doing the phone screen, and you've got no way of getting in touch with them. So we have no way of knowing, because people are able to have quite a lot of flexibility in the phone screen and how they play out the phone screen. So it's very possible that they will be intending to ask you functional questions. It's also very possible that they won't be intending to answer functional questions. So what I would say is get guidance from your recruiter. And if your recruiter doesn't know and can't give you direction, then plan for a worst case scenario and prepare to answer functional questions.
Excellent.
Do you want to pick the next one?
So the next one, I think, is the one that you've just answered. It's just, I think Claire changed functional stories to starline stories, but I think it's exactly the same response.
Okay, yeah, there's nothing else to say there then. Okay.
No, but this one is. So what are some of the common mistakes candidates make in the phone screen? So I'll tell you the ones that I've picked up, and I'm sure Gigi will be able to share her list. The ones that I think are the most common in my experience were, for the behavioral interview questions that interviewers will include in phone screen, not answering the question that's being asked. That's kind of at the top of my list. And then for why do you want to work at Amazon, giving a very giving a stock response that someone copied and pasted from
ChatGPT.
Yes, I'm completely forget. We use AI all the way, but I completely forget that the ChatGPT is there, and you can just generate the response. Yes, these responses. It's like the way I'm trying to explain to people is that when it comes to why Amazon, like the interviewer has like two buckets in front of them. The first bucket has a label on it that says, "I've heard this response 1,000,000 times," and then the other bucket has, "I've heard this response less than 1,000,000 times." You won't be able, whatever you tell them, it's going to go either in the bucket on the left or the bucket on the right. So you don't actually need to fork out anything super unique, because remember, two buckets, lots of interviews, they would have heard everything. It just needs to be personal to you, right? And so when someone copies and pastes a ChatGPT response, you go into the bucket on the left, and you need to get into the bucket on the right. And then for the tell me about yourself response, yeah, a whole bunch of hobbies, pro bono work, book preferences.
Just rereading your resume.
Rereading your resume, yeah, as well. But yeah, so that's these are my pet peeves. Like, what about yours?
Okay, so my first one is not really understanding what interview methodology they're walking into. So I had a whole bunch of candidates come, and I even still get it in coaching, bizarrely, where candidates come with really high-level stories that are focused on projects, right? And have no concept whatsoever that they're coming into an interview where someone wants to hear about their behaviors in the context of a project. They come expecting to talk about projects, and actually what they're coming to talk about is themselves. So that's the first thing that is so common, and that's actually how the vast majority of the filtering happens in the early rounds. The second one is coming without data points. So candidates come and say sales went up, sales went down. It took us weeks and weeks to do this, like just no data whatsoever. The result was really positive. Everyone was really happy. No data whatsoever. So I think that's the second big mistake that I would call out. I'll give you three, because three is always a good number. The third mistake I would say is that people come misunderstanding the leadership principles. They have not done enough work to really understand what the leadership principles are actually asking for in terms of behaviors. They've read the title of the leadership principle. They maybe have read the definition once or twice, but have not spent the time to actually internalize it and understand what type of behaviors must I demonstrate in order to be able to demonstrate that I am good at this leadership principle. They kind of assume they understand what our write a lot is without actually paying attention to what our write a lot actually requires from a behavioral point of view. So those are the three that I would give.
Excellent. Do you want to pick the next one?
I will pick the next one. For some reason I've got a lot. Oh, I know why I've got sciatica in my arm. I have a tendency to lean like this when I'm doing desk work, and I end up with sciatica. Oh, I'm so old. Right, let's do this. How many stories should have prepared for the loop round? Approximately 20. Should these all be around behavioral, especially for marketing interviews? Okay, so the number of stories you need, well, we would all say generally, and Amazon would align with us on this one, that you probably need 2 stories per leadership principle. So if you're expecting to have 5 interviewers, each who are going to do 2 leadership principles, then you need to have 10, 20 stories. If you're going to have more, you multiply it up. So 20 is a safe number, because even if you're at the top end of the number of interviewers that you're having at Loop, that will probably be enough stories. If you're at the bottom end and you're an L4, because your stories are shorter, you're probably still going to have 20 as a good number, because you're going to get through more questions as part of the interview. If you're an L6, then 20 might be more than you need if you're ending up with 5 interviewers versus 4 interviewers instead of 5. So, but 20 is safe, I would say. Maybe Yevgeny might tell me otherwise, but I think 20 is a solid number. It allows you to maybe flex 1 or 2 of them to answer different kind of questions, whilst actually not having too many times where you have to repeat. So 20, I say yes, is a good number. Should these all be around behavior, especially for the marketing interview? Yes, right? We've just talked about behavioral questions and leadership principles being 2 per interview. So I would definitely say 20, all focused on leadership principles. You may need to have other stories for the functional part of your interview, if you are indeed having a functional part of your interview. From a marketing perspective, Yevgeny, you can obviously pipe in here as well from your experience. It's actually quite divided in my experience. When I was leading marketing teams, I tended to not specifically ask functional questions, and I would rely on the behavioral questions to surface to me the level of people's functional skills as regards the area that we were working on. Now, if that person didn't actually have that functional experience and they were going to try and use kind of crossover skills, at that point, I might start picking into a little bit of detail about what they know about this particular area, because generally, you got to at least have some foundational understanding rather than just coming to it completely cold, unless you're really, really junior, kind of L4. But I do know that one of my candidates that I was coaching quite recently, who was interviewing for an outbound marketing role, specifically email, her interviewer went actually quite deep into her email marketing skills, because they were particularly focused on creating marketing automation, setting up some new systems. They weren't using the centralized Amazon email marketing release tool, which I thought, oh, lucky you. So they were trying to set up their own kind of external marketing automation. So because of that, they had to ask very specific questions about their functional skills. So there's no one rule. And as I said a minute ago, the person who's going to know the most about what you're going to face is going to be that recruiter. Okay, do you want to pick the next one? Oh, we're at half time. Should we do the commercial break?
Yes, we should, I think.
Yes? Okay. So, folks, we, as you know, put an enormous amount of effort into this channel. There are hours and hours of videos. And if you multiply the number of videos that you have there on the YouTube channel by the number of hours it took us to create them, you can probably multiply it by about 5. So massive amount of effort gone into this channel, and we really, really hope it helps you. But in return for that help, we do need to ask you a little bit favor. And it's not about giving us money. We're never going to ask you straight up to give us money. All we want is a very easy, quick action from you that should take you less than a second. And that is whenever you're watching any of our videos or even this live stream, that you give the algorithm a positive sign of how you feel about this. So that's either giving it a thumbs up, a like, or yeah, I've got no... Damn, no fireworks. We keep trying. Fireworks. Oh, you got... Oh, there you go. Yours is working. I don't know why mine isn't working. All right, so you give it a thumbs up, or you put a little comment. Hi, Gigi. Hi, Evgeny. Or if you've got a question, bang it under there. Or hilarious video, Gigi. Your hair looks mad. Bad lipstick, Gigi, which I have had before. Any of those things are going to trigger the algorithm to know that, number one, it presented that content to the right person. And then number two, that that person liked that content, which effectively will then boost the credits in the broader sense of the term. Our content gets over some of the other far less reliable, far less detailed, and far less actionable content that's out there on YouTube. So because we all know practice makes perfect, this is as true of your Amazon interview preparation as it is for anything else in life, we are going to ask you to spend the next 30 seconds, and it won't even take you 30 seconds, but the next 30 seconds watching a little piece of video that we have for you. And whilst you're watching that, please do just give us a little thumbs up. I can see how many people are on the stream over here, and I can see how many of you have liked, and some of you have already liked. So thank you very much for that. But really appreciate that. But those of you that haven't, please, whilst we play you this little bit of video, please do just give us a really, really quick thumbs up. Hopefully it doesn't take too much for you to do that. Just to let you know, it is a little bit loud, this video. So if you've got earplugs in like me, you might want to take them out. Or if you've got headphones on, you might want to push them back on your ear a little bit. But I'm going to play it now. And please, folks, do just please give us a thumbs up. Okay, playing the video now.
Like the stream, oh like the stream, oh like the stream, oh like the stream, like the stream, oh like the stream, oh like the stream, I like the stream, oh like the stream, oh like the stream, oh like the stream, like the stream, oh like the stream, oh like the stream, like the stream now, like the stream now, like the stream now, like the stream now.
Right, there we go, folks. Clearly I had too much time on my hands when I created those. I don't have that time now, but...
Right. Life used to be so much simpler back in the days.
It was. Right, yeah. Do you want to pick the next one? Is it your turn? I've lost track now.
It is my turn. Let's go. So, okay. What are some of the questions you should ask the recruiter once you are moved to the next round in terms of acing the future rounds? And how much can you rely on the recruiter to get special advice? Oh, that's a good question, actually. Right. So the first one is, what questions should you ask? As a baseline, ask any questions that come to mind. Don't think that there are any restrictions in terms of what questions you can or cannot ask. Anything you ask, it's like nothing that they can use against you. The worst that will happen is they will either not know, or they will say no, or something like that, or they, in most cases, they will actually be useful. So now, with regards to helping you ace the future rounds, to be honest, as from kind of where I stand, the best thing that they can do is to remove as much ambiguity in terms of what you should be expecting the future rounds, whether it's the second phone screen, or if you're in the recruiter screen, then it's the first phone screen, and then if there's going to be a second phone screen in the loop, what sort of loop composition, and phone screen composition that you can expect. For example, when it comes to the loop, how many behavioral rounds will it be? How many functional rounds? So you're interviewing for, I believe, a marketing position. Marketing is a non-technical role, and different teams will take their own position on how they want to evaluate functional skills. Some teams don't do it at all. Some teams do it. So If there are some practices in terms of asking marketing related questions, ask your recruiter, ask them. Also ask them what are the critical leadership principles for this position. So for someone to be, if someone is successful in this role, according to the hiring manager, like what LPs are just completely non-negotiable for this role, ask these questions, because this way you can tease out the information around what are the leadership principles that they're likely to interview on. Will there be any functional assessment questions, and if so, how does this team assess marketing competencies? And then for your phone screen, if that's your next stage, ask them who is likely to take this phone screen. Is it going to be the hiring manager? Is it going to be someone from the team? And ask them, how does the team normally run phone screens? What kind of questions I should expect? The worst that will happen is the recruiter will say no, or I don't know, but it's not going to be held against you. With regards to how much can you rely on the recruiter to get special advice, look, it's very difficult to say. There are some really good recruiters at Amazon, and I think most of them are probably good recruiters, and they will know what's happening in the team. Some recruiters won't know. Some recruiters might speak without knowing. It's completely impossible to know. I would always be biased towards trusting a word from someone who comes from Amazon as opposed to doubting it. And I would also trust that in case recruiters don't know or cannot answer your question, they will advise you as such. Would you have a different perspective on this, Gigi?
So I'm just going to add an additional one in terms of questions to ask the recruiter when you're moved to the next round. I would ask why other people who've been through Loop already have not been offered the role. So basically, why have other people been failing Loops? Because that can often tell you the things that the team are looking out for and are not seeing in other candidates. That can be really helpful. Yeah, I'd agree with you in terms of relying on recruiters, but just be careful in the sense of when recruiters get to the point where they tell you very specific things and then you build your entire interview plan around those specific things, it can be a disaster if those specific things don't come off. So I've had a candidate who was literally told by their recruiter, these are the exact questions you're going to be asked. They prepared for those exact questions and nothing else. And then the interview came around and the interviewer didn't ask any of those questions. So sometimes there's a miscommunication between recruiter and interviewers, and sometimes interviewers change their mind and they decide they want to do something else. So I would say once you get to a point where recruiters are giving you super specific information, like what questions you're going to be asked, I would take that with not a pinch of salt, but that's very risky to build your interview plan around all that because it may not come off. That's it. That's the other thing that I would add. So I'm going to pick the next one. Tamir. Hi, of course, you're more than welcome for the opportunity. How to identify the bar raiser in your upcoming interview? You've got a loop of 5, as I couldn't tell them from the names on LinkedIn profiles. Okay, so why would you want to? That's essentially the question I'm asking back. There is no need for you to understand or know who the bar raiser is because you shouldn't save your best stories for the bar raiser. Therefore, who cares who the bar raiser is? The bar raiser is going to read all of the feedback from everybody in the interview loop. So who cares what stories you tell them because they're going to see every story that you put out in the interview. The bar raiser is going to listen to the feedback from all of the interviewers. So again, who cares who the bar raiser is because the bar raiser is going to be taking on board not just their own opinion, but then everybody else's opinion and then changing their opinion based on if they are convinced by other people's opinion. From your perspective, the bar raiser is no different from any other interviewer on the loop. You should act like every single interviewer on that loop is the bar raiser because they essentially are, because the bar raiser is going to read everything that those people write and everything that they have, or they're going to take into account everything that they have to say. The real role of the bar raiser is behind the scenes. There's a whole bunch of responsibility, both somewhat admin and then obviously in managing the debrief that the bar raiser takes on. But that doesn't impact you. You just need to give your very, very best to every single interviewer. Do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yep. So I've noticed my behavioral responses sound more like project summaries than focused answers on the actual principle. Any advice on how to refine them? Okay. So at the very core basic principle: focus on just answering the question. That is, even if you don't know anything about leadership principles that they're trying to test you on, just pick a question and answer the question. Now, if you're building your story bank by linking stories to leadership principles, then what I would say is, first things first, realize that um, Amazon doesn't want to uh, see and hear evidence of all leadership principles packed into one story. That's why they have the luxury of scheduling multiple interviews with you. So you need to respond to that by focusing your stories on specifically the behaviors that they're looking for. So if you are using our products, we are giving you specifically the behaviors that they're looking for. So focus your stories on the behaviors that they're looking for. If you aren't using our products, then try and decipher it from the descriptions of the leadership principles, or do your research on YouTube and elsewhere to understand what they mean by these leadership principles. And then apply a mindset that basically says this, that Amazon doesn't want you to burn a project per story. Meaning, when they're asking you for situations, they're asking you for snapshots of very specific situations that might have happened many times during a project. You mentioned that your stories all sound like project summaries. Well, imagine diving into the details of the project. Imagine your project like a series, right? Like a season of your favorite series. And throughout every project, there are phases. And within those phases, there are specific situations, interactions that you've had with different colleagues, problems that you had to solve within those projects. I would imagine that if you ran projects, or you've ever seen a project plan along the lines of some sort of Gantt chart, whether it's in Excel or in a specific project management tool, you know what I'm talking about, right? So Amazon doesn't want you to summarize the whole project to respond to a question. You just enable yourself and give yourself the liberty to zoom in and recall a specific situation where your behaviors were shining as far as the leadership principles are concerned, and where there is no need to walk them through the whole project. You can just focus on a specific subset of your project, whether it's a milestone, a phase, or just a series of interactions, as long as they are relevant to that particular leadership principle. Would you build anything on this, Gigi?
Yes, I would. So I had this conversation with a client not so long ago. What's happening is, when you're reading the question, you're being asked, ASD, tell me about a time when, let's say, you had a disagreement with someone about something that disagreement with your manager about something that you considered important for the business. And I think what you're saying to me is, you're slightly reframing that question. And what you're actually answering is, tell me about a project when you had a difference of opinion with your manager about something you consider important for the business. And you're talking about the project, and your main focus is the project. And within that project, you have a disagreement with your manager about something you consider important for the business. But that reference to the disagreement with your manager makes up a very tiny part of the full story, because you're talking about the project. That's not what they're interested in. What they're interested in is, tell me about a time when you disagreed with your manager about something that you deemed important for the business. So the time that they are asking you about is the point where you disagree with your manager about something that's important for the business. The project only exists to provide context, so that when you are talking about the disagreement with your manager on something you consider important for the business, makes sense. You can't just start talking about the disagreement with the manager, because it'll lack context, and things that lack context, the human brain can't cope with. So what you need to be thinking about when you're looking at these questions is, how do I make myself the hero of the story, using the language I, and that I'm supposed to be focusing on the point in time that the question narrows in on. So another example is, tell me about a time where you faced a number of unexpected obstacles in order to deliver a key project. They don't want to know about the project where you experienced key obstacles. They want to know about the time you experienced the key obstacles. So your story has to be all about when you hit the key obstacles, and you need to be talking about the key obstacles. And the project only exists as context for you to be able to talk about the obstacles. Otherwise, your interview is not going to follow and it's not going to make any sense. So when you are reading this story, these questions, make sure you have locked in your mind, I am being asked about me, not I am being asked about the project. And I think if you think about the questions in that way, it becomes far easier not to talk about the project, because clearly you are talking about yourself. And I think that's a really, really key principle to hold in your head whilst you're being asked those questions, and it will fundamentally change the way you write your stories. Okay, make it a sense?
Makes sense. The next one is still yours.
Okay, cool. So you know there is a written exercise as part of your loop. What should I expect in terms of structure, scope, and how is it typically evaluated? Right. So, oh gosh, I wish I had less screens open. Right, there we go. So in terms of structure, we recommend you just follow the STAR model, because the question that you get for your written exercise is the same question that you could potentially get in the interview. So if in the interview, if you were to answer that question with the STAR model, which Amazon recommends, why wouldn't you do the same in the written exercise? You don't necessarily need to do subtitles, you know, situation, task, action, result, because that's a little bit clunky. But if that helps you in terms of your original writing of the document, then do that. I always make myself laugh when I say that. I'm so juvenile. But then take those headers out before you submit the document. So it will flow nicely, but you won't have those key headers in. So that's the first thing. Scope is irrelevant because this writing sample is about your ability to write. So it makes no difference really if it's a story that is a really complicated scope project or situation, or if it's a really simple project or situation, because this isn't about complexity and, you know, understanding what level you're operating at. This is purely about, can you write a clean and coherent document? So don't worry about scope. What is typically evaluated? Very simple. First thing is clarity of thought. So they're trying to really evaluate that you've got this kind of clear position in mind, that you have written something that's understandable, your argument is clear, and someone who knows nothing about this situation can follow it nice and simply. They want to make sure that there's like a single tone in the whole thing, that you're not swapping from first person to third person, and that 1 minute you're talking in very official business language and then the next minute it's really colloquial. So they want this kind of clear voice that comes through, and that whatever you've written, it's appropriate for the audience. So bear in mind that people reading your writing sample aren't going to be necessarily technical experts in your field. So a bar raiser might not know anything about your technical stuff. And if you write a really technically focused document, your bar raiser is going to have a clue what's going on. They want to do that because obviously they need to make sure that any document you write when you go into a business meeting is sensitive to the fact that the people around the room quite often won't be from your technical expertise, because there's a lot of cross-functional working that happens. They want to know, can you talk a language that everybody can understand? So the other thing they're thinking about is kind of organization and structure. So is everything clear? Have you made really clear points? Are they distinct points? Have you made sure you've introduced kind of an introduction so that people understand the basic, and there's that clearly body and conclusion, which the STAR model will give you? Is everything that you've used as example relevant? Does it kind of support the story that you're telling? And is your writing concise? You know, you want to make sure that you're only saying the same thing. You're only saying something once, that where possible, you are using as few words as possible to make a point. So that's conciseness as opposed to briefness, which is a different thing. And then just basics like spelling, grammar. Just have you delivered a tidy piece of work that is got the correct punctuation, the correct spelling, all those types of things. So if you can nail those things, then you will have a passable writing sample. It is a pass or fail exercise. So as long as your writing sample isn't doesn't come across with the kind of the educational standards of a 9th grader, then you'll be fine, because in the main, everyone has to learn to write again when they join Amazon, because there's a particular writing style that they follow. So it's a relatively low bar. I don't know if anyone that I bar raised for actually didn't make it through because of a poor writing style. I do remember objecting to somebody's writing style once, just once. And they were, bless them, they were Italian, and they were writing in their 3rd language. I mean, which I'm amazed that anyone would have 2nd language, because I'm useless. This person was writing in their 3rd language. I think German was their 2nd language. I wasn't a fan. I didn't think it was up to quality. I got a lot of pushback from the hiring manager saying that they thought it was okay and this person wouldn't have to write very much in their role anyway. So I let it slide, because actually I have to trust, if the hiring manager is saying they're not going to do much writing, then the other things were more important. So that's it. Hopefully that helps.
Amazing. Right, next one. During the behavioral interview, how do I know which principles the interviewers are looking for in the question? So,
We covered that already, didn't we?
are we?
Yeah, I think I said don't worry about the leadership principle, just answer the question. Yeah.
All right.
Move on to another one.
Well done for getting the offer from Dubai, L6, relocating soon. That's fantastic. Love the story. Right, next one. For the marketing role, the senior marketing manager, what qualities or what leadership principles would be the most important to be the top candidate? Look, technically this will depend on whatever the hiring manager believes. Like, if I was hiring for someone for a marketing role, I would be thinking customer obsession, invent and simplify, dive deep, deliver results. I would say think big depending on the role. You know, for L6, it probably would be one of the 10 that I would interview on, but would it be absolutely critical? Debatable. When I was interviewing for an L6, it was included, but whether it was critical, I still don't know. And then maybe a few more. But this would, again, it really depends on the hiring manager. What would be your top, Gigi?
Well, my top, to your point, is kind of irrelevant, because it's very role specific. So I was speaking to a candidate the other day. They were applying for a marketing function role, and the top LP for them was earn trust, because they were in a role that was an influencing role. They owned no levers themselves whatsoever, and they were trying to effectively influence central teams to deliver solutions that would help. They were moving to Japan, that would help JP. They owned none of the levers whatsoever, and they could do nothing themselves. So the key leadership principle for them was earn trust, because if they couldn't earn trust, then pointless. They weren't going to get anywhere. Earn trust is always going to be an important leadership principle for every single role across Amazon. But my other candidate, who was also bizarrely marketing and was applying for an outbound marketing role for email, earn trust, of course, was there, but wasn't that important, because they owned all the levers themselves. So they could execute their own marketing campaigns, and to hell with everybody else. So I think that demonstrates the point that we could reel off a whole bunch of leadership principles that we think are important for marketers, but there would be a list of 10. We can't tell you what the most top leadership principles would be that would deliver the top candidate for your role, because we don't know your role and we don't know the key challenges associated with your role. So we're going to go back to, you need to speak to your recruiter, and you need to see if they can tell you what the top leadership principles are. You can, of course, deconstruct your job description and try and work out what every single line refers to as regards the leadership principle, and then count them up and stat rank them. And that should hopefully give you an indicator. There are 2 videos on the YouTube channel that you can use for guidance on that. Or if you'd like, I can do the job for you as well. So I have a paid for service that you can use, and I can do that for you. I would warn you against using ChatGPT. I would tell you, do any of the others before you use ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is not that great on connecting the different nuances of language used by the different hiring managers to describe something with the leadership principles themselves. there's actually quite a lot of reading between the lines and quite a lot of knowing the typical phraseology used in an internal language point of view to connect to the leadership principles. So I'm sure everyone's using ChatGPT for a whole bunch of things. I do caution people when using ChatGPT to review Amazon stories, because to my point, ChatGPT doesn't quite get it, and to deconstruct job descriptions, because again, ChatGPT just doesn't understand the language of Amazon, regardless of whether it understands the leadership principles.
And the other point about, well, I think we've come to the end of the session.
Oh, sure. Okay, 15 seconds. All right.
But I think the point I would love to build on the point that you made about ChatGPT. The reason why ChatGPT does not understand Amazon is because ChatGPT was trained on the data that's out there in the open domain, and what's happening when it comes to assessment of your stories isn't anything that is available in the open domain. There you go.
Yeah. So basically, anything that anyone's putting out there is generally from people that don't really understand what's going on, because got to be honest, folks, people that understand what's going on are people like us, and we sell courses, and that real insight and information is embedded within our courses. We do give you a whole ton of free information, don't get me wrong, but anyone that knows what they're talking about is going to be holding something back because they make a job out of it. Anybody that doesn't make a job out of it is busy working at Amazon. Right. Okay. Or anywhere else, actually. They probably moved on, and if they've moved on, they're not thinking about Amazon, trust me. All right. So before you go, folks, and I'm sure a whole bunch of you are going to run off, do not leave before you have written down this URL. At the end of this URL are incredible freebies, the best freebies that you will get about Amazon interview preparation anywhere on the planet. I would bet my life on it. I'll tell you very briefly what's at the end of that link, and then you can all go off and do what else it is you need to do. I'm going to go and eat my pizza. So the first thing is a little taster of our Amazon Interview Success System course. It's a huge course. I don't know, I think there's like 16 hours of it, which covers everything to do with Amazon interview preparation. This is a tiny little snippet that focuses on customer obsession. So it shows you the different facets of customer obsession, as we call them, so the different ways into customer obsession, and specifically tells you what the interviewer is looking for in your customer obsession answer, right? So you can literally build your answer based on what we're telling you they're looking for. So take that. The second thing it gives you is what we call the Amazon Interview Preparation Pack. It's got a couple of models in it, but the most useful thing in there is a big old bank of what we call plausible Amazon interview questions. They are not the exact Amazon interview questions. Amazon would not be happy if we shared those with you, but they are our creation based on the fact that we really do understand the leadership principles and we know what Amazonians are looking for. We've created our own version of a story bank. So you can use it for practice. Don't use it assuming that anyone's going to ask you those questions, because they won't, but they are very good for practice and testing yourself on how you would answer specific questions based on your kind of pre-structured stories. The final thing it gives you, if you take out either of those, is access to our Heartbeat community. We have a community of about 6,500 people who either previously interviewed at Amazon or are currently interviewing at Amazon. So you can try and make buddies and join up with people and do mock interviews together. There's also an AI tool in there, which is basically trained on all of the content from the YouTube channel. So if you have a question and you can't be bothered to scroll through the YouTube channel, you can literally just ask our bot, Andy, and he will answer the question for you if the answer exists in the YouTube channel. So that's it, folks. Thank you very much for joining us. We have lost a few people who got bored of me telling what the contents of the freebies were, but that's okay. The rest of you have stayed. So thank you very much for joining. For those of you with interviews coming up, we have our fingers crossed. If we didn't get to your question, honestly, feel free to drop the question into the YouTube channel. We will definitely get back to you, probably within 24, 48 hours, something like that, but we will get back to you. So please, if we missed you, just put the question into the YouTube channel or come back next week if the question can wait, and we will be here. Hopefully I will be here with even more suntan, because it's lovely and sunny here in the UK. So
it's going to be so sunny. It's going to be amazing.
Watch me get darker and darker up until
and me redder and redder.
All right, folks. Thanks very much. Stay safe in this scary and mad world. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.